Hello, today is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. I'm Sarah Crafassi, and this is Staying Connected. Last Thursday, AT&T publicly acknowledged another massive data breach affecting more than 100 million of its current and former wireless customers. This breach notice comes less than 4 months after a similar announcement that more than 8 million of AT&T's former and current internet customers' personal information had been breached. On today's podcast, I'm joined by LB3's Deb Bowling, who will explain the numbers and data related to these AT&T breaches, as well as how the most recent breach may impact you or your enterprise, even if you aren't a current AT&T wireless customer. Deb, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. It's no surprise that data breaches and the threat of falling victim to a breach are among enterprises' top concerns. But breaches occur so frequently that enterprises not using AT&T Internet services may have skimmed over AT&T's March 2024 announcement, even though the breach data included social security numbers, names, addresses, and passwords. Those with no or only a few AT&T corporate wireless devices may also want to ignore AT&T's breach disclosure last week. They can, but they shouldn't. First, the breach data covered communications over a relatively recent time, approximately 6 months from May of 2022 to around January of 2023. Second, the breach data includes call logs with telephone numbers called from the AT&T wireless phone, even to a non-AT&T landline or non-AT&T mobile customer, as well as information related to the frequency and length of calls and the cell location data. The cell location data can be triangulated, and it's specific enough that in the past it was used by emergency responders to find the location of a wireless caller. As AT&T admits, and most savvy people know, it's easy to combine AT&T's disclosed customer information with other public and private information to infer a customer's name and location, as well as information regarding with whom the customer spoke. Equally important, and perhaps more frustrating, is this breach was yet another on Snowflake's cloud platform, where multi-factor authentication was not used. You may recall similar breaches on Snowflake's platform impacting Advanced Autoparts, Allstate, Anheuser-Busch, Los Angeles United, Mitsubishi, Neiman Marcus, Progressive, Pure Storage, State Farm, Ticketmaster, and the list goes on.
Yikes. So AT&T didn't address or try to fix the underlying risks related to its use of Snowflake in light of this knowledge?
No, even after this, neither AT&T nor Snowflake required its IT administrators to activate multi-factor authentication. Snowflake now claims it is in the process of updating its platform to require MFA.
It looks like there were warning signs for AT&T that they didn't act on. So what can enterprises do then to lessen the impact of this breach and to stay as protected as possible moving forward?
Well, this may sound very familiar, but it's imperative. Before contracting with any technology vendor, enterprises need to identify the types of information the vendor will have access to and assess the vendor and its underlying cloud provider's security practices. The more sensitive the information, the deeper the dive. Most technology vendors will give you their general publicly available information about InfoSec, but that's rarely enough. Consider issuing an information security questionnaire to be completed by the vendor and each of its cloud providers.
Why are we talking in terms of before rather than during contracting?
Information is a critical asset for every enterprise. Completing information security questionnaires takes time, so vendors typically want to charge customers for it. Before the final bidder is chosen, vendors' sales teams pining for new business may be willing to absorb the costs.
Oh, okay, that's good insight. So there's got to be more though, right?
As you and I know, Sarah, the vendor security practices provide little protection if they aren't in the contract, with a remedy if the vendor fails to abide by them. The contracts should have an information security requirements attachment. Its scope and structure depends on the sensitivity of the information accessed, and the requirements should be customized accordingly. A vendor's resistance is also on a spectrum based on whether the vendor is allowed to change those security requirements. Don't let them. There has to be a minimum. There are numerous potential remedies for vendors' failure to comply with security requirements. They range in increasing difficulty to obtain from none specified, where the enterprise would need to claim breach and prove damages, through a small SLA credit, make sure it's a non-exclusive remedy, up to a right to terminate the service without liability. There's also a small possibility of an injunction requiring the vendor to perform. The relative value of these remedies depends on the ease of moving to another provider.
Got it. And I read that AT&T's data breaches included old customer information. So how can enterprises deal with this type of risk when they aren't even in an active contractual relationship with the carrier?
Well, the first thing is don't rely on your template confidentiality clauses. The IT services are unique. By their nature, the services access extensive enterprise and enterprise customer information, telecom services to complete the calls, and cloud services to meet the business's specific needs. Your enterprise's confidential information should include everything derived from the provision of the service and all information uploaded to the service. You should also limit the vendor's disclosure of the information only to subcontractors and cloud providers you have approved. Finally, you should require the vendor to certify that all enterprise confidential information was securely disposed of at expiration of the contract. That doesn't mean the vendor will be obligated to delete this information if it is required by law to keep a copy, but you can narrowly define when the exceptions apply. Interestingly, for the wireless breach, AT&T claimed it kept the information because it was required by law to comply with AT&T's tax obligations, and the kicker, to improve AT&T's business. A good confidentiality clause would have helped.
Thanks, Deb. And are there any other protective measures enterprises can take to try to maintain top-tier data security?
Sure, there's one more key item. Before sending any information to an IT vendor, encrypt the information using a key only known to your enterprise. Encryption in transit and at rest is standard these days, but processing the information may require unencrypted access, and in those circumstances, you may need special security requirements.
Okay, good advice. Any closing thoughts?
Enterprises buying telecoms and IT services must be vigilant. Keyed encryption combined with data minimization, as required by numerous privacy laws around the world, limits the risks of exposing enterprises and their customers' information. Don't dismiss security breaches because it's not one of your current vendors or even a past vendor. Your information may have been exposed. If there's any mention of a cloud provider, look even more closely. That cloud provider may be hosting many of your critical services. Even if you don't know it, it may be a subcontractor to one of your providers. Even if not, it may involve a vendor you are considering. Mitigate your future risk with information security due diligence before you contract, and include robust information security and confidentiality requirements in your contracts.
Okay, that is a lot of helpful information. Thanks, Deb. And if you are interested in learning more about AT&T's latest data breach or what your enterprise can do to maintain best-in-class data protection practices, please drop Deb, me, or any of our LB3 or TC2 colleagues an email or give us a call. And finally, you can always stay up to date by subscribing to these podcasts, by checking out our websites, and by following us on LinkedIn.